Hey everyone, and welcome to r/LetsNotMeet. And let's be real, my introduction was way too jovial for this sub, because this is the place that goes above and beyond regular spooky stories. Here you'll find stories about people who've lived through some serious stuff and lived to tell the tale. Now, with that sort of an introduction, I don't want to leave you hanging, so let's get straight into this first one by user/Tamira is redditing. Wendell was a panhandler near my college, and I always gave him my change when I had extra. Usually, I keep a hard rule not to give money to individuals, because I give it to local charities instead, where I can be sure the money is going to a specific cause. This one panhandler though, he always sang opera music, quite beautifully all things considered. Even though it was clear he was begging for money due to poverty and homelessness, not busking for tips, I always thought it was admirable that he was trying to perform a service in exchange for the money. And I don't like carrying coins, so I gave what I could. It wasn't much, barely $1 each time. I would occasionally strike up conversations with Wendell, even if I didn't have any money for him. He liked to make students laugh with funny impressions or jokes. He was a bit older, I'm an undergrad, he was probably in his 40s or 50s. So we'd mostly have quick chats about the news or the weather or whatever, nothing deep. Sometimes he'd randomly share something so intimate that I'd feel obligated to reciprocate with something at least superficially personal. For example, he'd blurt out that he almost went to college on a baseball scholarship, but drugs ruined everything. I'd be like, oh wow, sorry to hear that. I play volleyball, not for a scholarship though. See you around, okay? Once, Wendell called me over while I was walking with a professor/advisor. And I didn't want to be rude, so I went over just to say a quick hello and introduce my advisor. When we walked away, my advisor was pretty clearly horrified and asked why Wendell knew me by name. He said the homeless in this city weren't like the homeless in my smaller town back home. I figured he was being elitist, and I think he could tell I hadn't taken him seriously, because after we dropped the subject, just before I left, he reiterated that I shouldn't forge friendships with the homeless population in this city, or even give them money, because the chronically homeless, the ones on the street enough that you could get to know them, tended to have criminal or addictive histories. I was surprised, because my advisor is usually pretty progressive and compassionate. So I appealed to him with, Wendell is a victim of post-capitalist society, and all the other things I'd learned in his very own classes. But he wasn't having any of it. Basically saying that however Wendell became chronically homeless, now he was, and I should act accordingly. So my professor strongly implored me not to continue even talking to Wendell at all. I kind of shook my head thinking, okay boomer, and if anything, felt fortified by the warning. Like it was a confirmation that I was a radical doing the right thing, leading a new path, breaking down barriers, and bettering society. I got closer to Wendell and shared more about my life with him. But the very next time I walked to Wendell, he was really irritable and distant, and I wasn't sure why. Until he said, so, your boyfriend, you two live together or what? And I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, what boyfriend? And he said, the guy I met from yesterday you were walking down the street with. And I laughed, explaining it wasn't my boyfriend. It was just my academic advisor. Then all of a sudden, he wasn't irritable anymore. He was as chatty as he'd ever been. I probably should have taken that as a red flag, but I didn't think about Wendell much at all then. I only saw him once or twice a week, and only for a few minutes. It was around then that Wendell started bringing me gifts. I'd pass him and he'd have a flower for me, or a metal machine piece. I never refused, because I figured it was a means of preserving his dignity when accepting money, like with his opera singing. One of my roommates did remark on the flower once, and when I explained, she said it was weird. I thought she was also just being elitist, and that I was enlightened, bridging the class divide, and superior to her neoliberal paranoia. I mean, come on, it was just a flower. My advisor clocked all this, so brought it up with me again a while later, saying he was worried I was being manipulated. I tried to tell him about Wendell's opera singing and impressions, and how he even almost went to college. But then I remembered the reason he lost his baseball scholarship, and I stopped short. Looking at it through that lens kind of made me reconsider the whole thing. I thought about what my professor had said. Sparing the details, we did talk for like half an hour. And I finally connected the dots that Wendell did have a history of drug use. And he did sometimes mention how a previous girlfriend overreacted to something that he'd done and had derailed his life besides the drugs. So I decided maybe I should think about distancing myself a little. But very shortly after, the pandemic hit and classes went virtual. So, to save on rent, I went home to my parents' house. Still in the state, but not near campus at all. About 3 weeks into being home, I was watching a friend's Insta story when I heard Wendell singing opera in the background and thought, oh, I forgot all about him. Hope he's doing alright. And that was that. I kept watching different stories. Later that night, something about the story kinda stuck in my gut. It had popped into my mind a few times subconsciously, and I'd ignored it. But it kept coming back. So I decided to go and watch it again. That's when I realized my friend's video wasn't from our college town. It was from my much smaller hometown, which is nowhere near my college. That freaked me out a little. But I figured everyone moved around when the pandemic hit. My town isn't that small. It isn't that far from the college. It was probably a coincidence. I really wanted to mention it to my parents, but they had always warned me against talking to homeless people. Besides, like, can I buy you a meal? So I felt too embarrassed to explain the situation to them. Especially since it was probably a coincidence, and I would sound so conceited if I were like, he definitely followed me because aren't I just so great that he's probably obsessed with me. We have a type 1 diabetic in the family, so we took quarantining very seriously. I figured I'll never see him anyways. I'm not going out anytime soon. It doesn't matter where he is. And nothing happened. Well, one thing. A girl from my high school, who also ended up at my college, called me and in summary said, "This is gonna sound really weird, but I feel like I should say something. I was downtown and a beggar asked me about you. Like, specifically you. He knew you were on club volleyball, he knew your major. I didn't tell him anything, but I thought you should know." I was pretty alarmed at first, because how would he know I know this girl? But once we talked, I learned she'd been wearing a sweatshirt from our college. So I thought about it, and decided he probably saw that sweatshirt, figured she might know me from college since we were both from his town, and was just trying to find out how I was doing. I thought it was sweet, also a little weird, but he was a little weird. That was part of his charm. I thanked her, but told her not to worry about it. Besides, I wasn't in town much longer anyways. I decided to go live back near campus. It was impossible to get my coursework done with my whole family around all day. So I went back to campus a while later, didn't think about Wendell at all, until I saw him back on the same corner, just a week after I returned to campus. Okay, even I knew at this time that something was wrong. I stopped giving him money, stopped talking to him, but I was so humiliated by how high and mighty I'd been, insisting that nothing was wrong, and everyone else was being paranoid and elitist, that I decided not to tell anyone what I'd noticed. I was already barely leaving my apartment, never going on campus, and his usual spot was right by campus. I felt bad about potentially hurting his feelings, or reading too far into the situation. But I figured he'd get the message, and better safe than sorry. After finals, I decided to visit my brother in a different state. His roommate had moved home, leaving an extra bed. So I drove up to his place to celebrate the end of the year and get away from it all. About the 9th day in, I was woken up way earlier than usual. When my brother isn't working or in school, he sleeps until noon, to the sound of my brother talking at the door. I got up to see what was going on because we weren't seeing anyone. We stayed totally quarantined. His state was being hit hard. My brother was talking nicely to someone outside through a crack in the door. But when he turned, he looked royally mad at me. He turned back outside and said, "Hold on here." Closed the door, despite the other guy protesting. But I couldn't hear what he said exactly. My brother immediately got in my face and whisper yelling said, "Mum and Dad are gonna kill you." I had no idea what he was talking about. But my first thought was that the cops had come to arrest me for something. It was the only logical thought I could generate first thing in the morning. The only thing I could imagine being arrested for was my fake ID, which I only even used to get into concerts, and obviously none lately. So I was really in shock. But my brother was still going. As best I can remember, because I was panicked at this point, he was saying, "And I'm gonna kill you. This is so not cool. You didn't even ask. I wouldn't have said yes anyways, but you didn't even think to ask?" I realized that didn't align with being arrested, so finally I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You're dating a 40-year-old guy? Older, 45 maybe? Of all people out there? I mean, Jesus. Dad's gonna kill you and then have a heart attack and die, which'll kill Mum. And you invited him to my house while we're supposed to be social distanced? You two can go to a hotel because he isn't coming in here. I wasn't a jerk to him out of respect for you, but if he doesn't leave now, that's gonna change." So I had no idea what he was talking about. None. I hadn't connected any of the pieces yet. Because you've got to remember, Wendell was such a small part of my life until this point. I almost never saw him or thought about him. My whole world had been turned upside down in a pandemic in the preceding few months. He was background noise. Faint background noise. Compared to all the other stuff I had going on. So I just said the first thing that came to mind. "Dude, I don't know why you're getting so mad at me. I don't have a boyfriend. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone's got the wrong house." My brother looked like he was going to rip my face off. He said, "We're adults. Come on, don't effing lie to me. I'm not Mum and Dad. We can't deal with this if you're going to lie to my face." And I said I wasn't lying, and I think he could tell from my expression and tone that I genuinely was serious. So now he was as confused and irritated as I was, and he was like, "He didn't just vaguely say he was here for his girlfriend. He used your name. He rattled off a ton of very exact info. I think he said he said you guys had a fight, and he was here to work things out?" Now, I've been looking for a boyfriend for a long time, so I was half thinking, maybe dreams do come true. Might as well see who it is. But I was also starting to feel a bit sick in the pit of my stomach. Because it would be one thing if this happened on campus or back home. But I had changed states. My brother moved to this state for school, and I don't know anyone here but him and his friends. So I finally did the obvious thing and looked through the peephole. I almost didn't recognize him at first because he'd showered, shaved, and changed into clean clothes for the first time since I'd known him. But it was Wendell standing on my brother's doorstep, hundreds of miles from his original corner. I was so scared I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding like I was slipping under deep water with my legs tied. I just backed away from the door and sat down on the couch and tried to collect myself. My brother thought this was me affirming that there really was some secret older boyfriend who'd just made himself known. So it took a minute for him to cut off his ranting and his dramatic, "What will grandma think?" stuff. Finally he realized I was tearing up and he sat down, calmed down and apologized and said we'd figure it out. And I whispered, still out of breath, "No, you don't understand. He followed me here." My brother still didn't get it. "What? You didn't want him to come here? What was your fight about?" he asked, still thinking the guy was my boyfriend. I managed to repress my panic enough to explain the broad strokes to him. But I don't think he fully grasped how creepy it was in the moment, because he was like, "You're joking. That's hilarious. I'll take care of this." He went to the door and called from behind it. "Yo, just checked. She's not here. Must have packed out this morning. You should do the same. I'm taking this social distancing real serious." And winked at me. That's when, as my brother says when he tells this story, it got real weird. Wendell said, "You're lying. I heard her in there. Tell her I'm sorry. I don't know why she's been avoiding me, but I got cleaned up for her and I'll take her anywhere she wants to go. Tell her that. Tell her. And don't lie. I'll know if you lie." That rubbed my brother the wrong way, and he said back, "Bro, you're not taking her anywhere. Now get off my deck before we have a problem." And Wendell sounded like he was walking away. But instead, he was going over to the window. When I saw him staring, he looked different than I'd ever seen him. Even a few seconds earlier, when I'd glanced through the peephole, his clothes were clean, but they didn't match or fit. Eyes bugged out of his head, white stuff caked on the corners of his mouth I hadn't noticed at first. Shaking, just kind of disconnected from reality. He started banging on the window, shouting things like, "That's my girlfriend, you can't keep her in there, you little jerk, let her out, let her out! I'm coming, baby, I'm coming!" I couldn't tell if it was meant to be a threat or a reassurance. I was so scared. I was too scared to run or even move. I think my brother was almost as surprised by the sudden outburst. He was rolling up his sleeves like he was preparing to go out there. And I was trying to make my voice work to beg him not to. But I was so anxious, scared, embarrassed, and sad that I'd missed all the signs leading up to this, all the opportunities to prevent this, that our friendship was never the wholesome thing I thought it was. Though of course that's something I had already begun to grapple with before this day, and had so many thoughts swirling in my head, fear being chief among them. All I could do was scream. Not words, just "Ah!" and cover my ears and drown the whole situation out. Before my brother could charge out the door, he's an athletic guy, but I don't think he's ever actually been in a physical fight. Wendell punched through the window. Nothing actually happened when he punched though, and there was an eerie moment of silence when nobody moved. I think even I stopped screaming. But when he pulled his hand back, all hell broke loose. A fair amount of blood started spurting out when he pulled his hand back through the glass. The things he was shouting started to make even less sense, along the lines of, "Look what you did to me! This is a test! I told you I couldn't be stopped!" And the look in his eyes got even more distant. I think the sight of the blood, which has always made my brother really squeamish, made him realize this was real. And he finally yelled, "Damn it sis, call 911! While he leaned against the door, which Wendell was now repeatedly running into, even though he was nowhere close to breaking it down. I don't even remember making the call, but apparently I did, because within 10 minutes, the police arrested Wendell without resistance. He kept trying to tell them his girlfriend was trapped in the house, and he'd come all this way to save her. My poor brother was even momentarily handcuffed, and had to explain he hadn't taken me hostage. And probably one of the most haunting memories of the whole event is, as they carted Wendell away for arrest, he started singing opera music. I've learned a lot of important common sense and life lessons from this saga. But most of all, Wendell, let's not meet again. Wow, this story had me on the edge of my seat pretty much the whole time. It's one that is absolutely crazy. I didn't even realize how long it was, because I felt like I got through that in like a few minutes. Look, OP, you got really lucky there that all happened while your brother was home, just to make sure things were safe, and it wasn't just you alone in your apartment or something. That could have ended really, really badly. So yeah, OP, I'm really happy you're safe, and I'm happy you got away. That is quite the story. And I think I'll squeeze another one in, this one by /Don't You Weep. So, onto the story. This all happened in August 2017. I was 23 and had just moved back into my mum's place, which happened to be about 30 minutes from my nearest friend's place. My car broke down, so I was Ubering everywhere I had to go. I went down to my friend's place to help the move. Went to Target to grab some champagne and orange juice, because I apparently hated myself, and thought an imminent hangover was a great idea. Fast forward to that night, and of course, I'm doubled over throwing up, with a migraine, and can barely lift my head, and have to work the next day's morning shift. My friends have no idea whether they have any sort of over-the-counter meds for headaches. But, of course, the stoner of the house offered me an edible. Now, I may have killed the bottle of champagne, but I haven't touched weed in years. I ate half of that edible and waited about 45 minutes to feel better and called my Uber. I was getting picked up in an apartment complex, and of course had to walk to the front to find the driver, because I've never met an Uber driver that can locate any address with accuracy. I get in the back seat and he turns around to introduce himself. This guy had a southern drawl that would make molasses seem like water. It was at this moment I realised I effed up. I told him I had a migraine and just wanted to go home. He pulls out a water bottle that was already opened and puts in some random pills and tells me these should make me feel much better. So, of course, I politely grab them and then proceed to stuff them into the seat and shove the water bottle in the pocket in front of me. We begin our 30-ish minute journey to my mum's apartment. If it weren't for Mary Jane coming along for the ride, I probably would have hopped out right then. This guy starts off the drive by telling me prison stories, and then somehow it delves into how the world is going to end by December 20-something of 2017. Every few sentences, he's now bringing up his bunker. He asks me constantly if I just wanted to head there instead of home. Me, being high, kept telling him I'd love to, but I have work, so I can't. Maybe next time, I guess. He's cycling through conspiracy theories, from the UFO flat to Kandahar, Afghanistan giants. He says, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but look up Kandahar, Afghanistan on YouTube. Also, in case y'all didn't know, this world ain't heliocentric. Just get a pair of binoculars, you'll see. At some point, he's telling me that he has an arsenal of guns. He asks me if I have guns, and my liberal millennial butt tells him I have lots of guns. He grows opium at his bunker, and again asks me to come with him. I'm panicked, texting everyone I know, sharing my location, and started recording. I managed to get about 7 minutes in total of this 30-minute drive on film. As we're getting closer and closer to the exit, he needs to take me to drop me off. He's still in the far left lane on this 4-lane highway. I keep telling him to move over, and the exit is coming up, and this creepy mother effer keeps telling me how well stocked his bunker is. He misses my exit. Finally, I lose it and start screaming at him to get me home, and that my mum is waiting for me and I have work tomorrow. Like my job means anything to this psycho or even me. He finally does get off the exit after I started kicking his seat, threatening to jump out the moving car. I ran out of his car so fast when he hit the red light outside of the apartment complex. As soon as I got outside, I tried telling my mum what happened, but she brushed it off and was more disappointed that I told her I'd taken an edible. The next morning, I coherently explained what actually happened and showed her the videos, and we reported him to Uber. I still take Ubers on occasion, but I will never use one while alone and inebriated ever again. And this is the reason I don't consume THC. The universe knows when I'm high, and things like this happen to me. So, creepy Uber driver wanting to take me to his bunker, let's not ever meet again. And I'm actually kinda curious if this strategy ever worked for this dude, but I'm glad you're safe, OP. And guys, I think this post will be the last one for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel for Reddit videos 3 times every single week. But with that said, that is it from me. I hope you all enjoyed, and all I want to do is see you all here next time. See you later, guys.